Grumman didn't just build fighters that won wars. They built flying boats with basements, broomsticks for landing gear, and rockets strapped to the sides. I'm Bill, and this is Buffalo Air Park. Let's dive in. Alright, so you have to hear this. I went down the rabbit hole the other night on Grumman. You know, the ironworks? The guy who built the Hellcat, the Tomcat, big, angry fighters designed to survive carrier decks and knock holes in history. But before Grumman was winning wars in the Pacific, they were obsessed with something else entirely. They were obsessed with making boats that could fly. And not just one boat. Grumman built an entire family of amphibians, each one tougher, stranger, and more engineered than the last. The duck, the goose, the widgeon, the mallard, and finally, the albatross. And the deeper you dig into these things, the more you realize some of the solutions Grumman came up with were either pure genius or absolutely unhinged. Let's start with where it all begins. The J2F duck showed up in the mid-1930s, and I'm just gonna say it. This thing looks like a shoe with wings. It's a biplane. It's chunky. It has fixed struts everywhere, but this airplane is foundational. Grumman didn't just bolt floats onto an airplane. The float was the fuselage. The hull was deep, strong, and blended right into the airframe. And because the hull was so deep, the designers realized something incredible. They had room downstairs. I'm not kidding. The pilot and gunner sat up top, but inside the hull, inside the float, there was literally a lower compartment where you could cram 2 passengers or a stretcher. The Duck was basically a 1930s Navy biplane with a basement. Flying it, though, was a workout. The landing gear was narrow and hand-cranked. You didn't flip a switch. You wound the wheels up like you were making pasta. But this thing refused to die. There was a duck in the Philippines during World War II called the Candy Clipper. One of its cylinders failed, so the mechanic sank another damaged duck in the bay, ripped a cylinder out of its engine underwater, installed it on the Clipper, and sent it flying again. That Frankenstein airplane flew medical supplies and candy to troops and became the last aircraft to escape Bataan before surrender. That's not an airplane. That's an act of defiance. By 1937, Grumman decided to get modern. Enter the G-21 Goose. This was Grumman's first monoplane amphibian, and their first twin-engine one. And it wasn't built for the military at all. It was built because a group of very wealthy Long Island businessmen wanted to commute from their waterfront mansions to Wall Street without sitting in traffic. So Grumman built them a flying yacht. It had twin radial engines, a strong hull, and windows that made it look permanently surprised. And just a quick warning, if you ever hang around seaplane pilots, do not call them geese. The correct plural is Grumman gooses. Yeah, I don't like it either, but those are the rules. The Goose was so good that once the war came along, the military snapped them up, and after the war, Bush pilots absolutely fell in love with them. Some operators flew Gooses for decades in saltwater environments. Others went full Alaska and removed the landing gear entirely. Who needs wheels when you have ice and ocean? Then Grumman thought, what if we make the Goose smaller? That gave us the G-44 Widgeon. This one hits close to home for me, because in the late 1940s, my dad had a Widgeon at Buffalo Air Park, and that alone tells you what kind of airplane this was. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't exotic. It was practical, trustworthy, and tough enough to live a working life. The Widgeon finally gave pilots a break, hydraulic landing gear, no more arm workouts, and during the war, these little airplanes even carried a single depth charge. That led to one of the most awkward victories in Coast Guard history. In 1942, a Widgeon pilot attacked a German U-boat off Louisiana and was credited with sinking it. Medals were handed out. History books were written. Decades later, divers found the submarine somewhere else entirely. Turns out, wrong U-boat. The real target basically shrugged and sailed away. Credit for enthusiasm, though. And yes, if you're thinking Fancy Island, de plane, that was a French-built Widgeon. After the war, luxury came roaring back. In 1946, Grumman introduced the G-73 Mallard, the executive cruiser of amphibians. It had tricycle landing gear, a wet wing, plush interiors. This was the airplane for CEOs, royalty, and King Farouk of Egypt. But my favorite part? The emergency landing gear procedure. If the hydraulics failed, the manual didn't tell you to pull a lever or crank a handle. No. You were required to carry a broomstick. You stuck the broom through a hole in the cabin and physically pushed the wheel down until it locked. Imagine sipping a drink in the back while the co-pilot jogs past you holding janitorial equipment. Peak luxury aviation. And finally, we reached the monster, the HU-16 Albatross. This thing wasn't built for commuting. It was built to land in the open ocean and rescue downed airmen in seas that would make other aircraft think twice. It had a massive wingspan, a deep V hull, and when the water got too rough for a normal takeoff, they strapped rockets to it. JATO bottles blasted the Albatross off the surface like something out of a sci-fi movie, and sometimes even that wasn't enough. There's the famous case where an Albatross landed in heavy seas, damaged the hull, and couldn't take off, so the crew taxied on the ocean 45 miles before getting help. In another case, they taxied for 5 days. 5 days. From the hand-cranked duck to the broomstick-equipped Mallard to the rocket-assisted Albatross, Grumman proved one thing over and over again. If you build it strong enough, you can make a brick float and fly. And that wraps up another tale from aviation's stranger side. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.